Hey, how's it going guys? My name is Abyss, and in today's video, we're going to be going over Jingliu's pull value. We'll also cover her kit, her best teams, her best relics, and just some general knowledge you might need to know. By the time this video is up, her rerun should be out, and some of you are probably wondering whether she's really worth going for. Let's go over it through some different perspectives. For an early game player especially, I think she's a great pickup. If you don't have many DPS fleshed out, she's the second best in my opinion. Power creep shouldn't be an issue since she is one of the top DPS already. If she does get power crept, every other DPS will be as well. With her talent, she can buff her own crit rate and her attack. At level 1, her talent buffs her crit rate by 40%. So even off the bat, you've got much more crit rate than you would have on other DPS. And you get that just for free. She has that super low barrier to entry, some decent light cone options outside of her signature as well, and she gets tons of stats through her traces too. With good AoE coverage as well, that's one less worry to have. For those of you that feel like you're in that mid-game kind of area, I'd say she's still high value. If you have 2 to 3 DPS already, then you shouldn't feel pressured to go for her. However, if you do feel like you want another DPS, you can't go wrong with her. Jingliu is really capable of just brute forcing through content, so as long as the enemy doesn't have like a special ice resistance, you'll be doing tons of damage to them anyway. For those of you in the end game, you probably don't really need this advice as much. I think at this point you should have your couple of DPSs built and their respective team comps. She definitely isn't a necessity for you guys to pick up, but if you do want a crazy strong DPS, she does the trick really well. Barring Acheron, she probably out DPSs most of your current damage dealers with equal investment or even less. But just from my perspective, I'd say you might as well just wait for a character that you like that's coming up. And here's a special note for the free-to-play players. If you really want her, you can go for her. She has tons of options. I will be going through all of it. So don't feel like you need to get her at a certain Eidolon level or even her signature. You'll be fine without it, and she has free-to-play team comps too. She is a little bit different to some other characters, so I thought I'd have a little section explaining how to use her. So firstly, okay, hope that helped. My first attempt at explaining this was way too long, so I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. All it really is about ultimate timing. So here's when it's fine to ult. As you enter the spectral state, when you have 0 stacks out of the state, or just before you're about to leave the spectral state, you can extend the duration of your enhanced state. As you use that final stack and you just get your ult, you can ult as soon as possible, and then you will be able to keep the stack. Well, I guess it's gain a stack whilst you're about to lose the enhanced state, and you'll be able to stay in the state. Now we'll move on to some light cone options. We'll start off with the 3 stars. Collapsing Sky should be the only real 3 star that you use. As a 3 star light cone, it is very easy to get to S5. If I remember right, this is actually the first light cone that you get in the game, so everyone should have at least one. The main damage dealt by Jingliu will be from her skill, and that light cone buffs her skill by up to 40% at S5 or 20% at S1. Next up, let's go through the 4 star options. Firstly, we've got a secret vow. This light cone is pretty similar to the 3 star. It's a bit of an upgrade because you can do extra damage with the ult as well, and at S5 it's the same, the 40% mark, and you get that extra chance to do more damage if the enemy has higher health than you. That kind of bonus effect doesn't really kick in after the first hit, so for any of your elites or bosses, you don't really get to make full use of that unless it's on the start of their first or second or third phase. If you do have this light cone, it will still be a good usage one for her, so don't worry too much about it. Next up is Under the Blue Sky, another gacha light cone, but this one should be fairly common to get. It provides a bit of an attack boost, and as long as you're killing one mob every 3 turns, you are getting that crit rate buff by 12%, which is just that bit more helpful. And lastly, we have the 5 star light cones. I'll kick it off with the least recommended of the 3 that I have for you guys, and that will be something irreplaceable. This is Clara's signature light cone, but I don't think it fits too well with Jingliu. This one should be fine to use if any of the other options that I've listed, you have on another character or something. And with higher base stats, it's not too big of an issue. I happen to have quite a few of them, so if your luck is anything like mine, you can feel free to slap this on. Our next 5 star light cone is On the Fall of an Aeon. This is the free-to-play player best pick. This one you can get from the Herta shop. I do still think this is the first light cone that you should get from the store. And it's really easy to get the first light cone since you only have to do I think up to world 4 at level 1 difficulty, so you only need level 50 characters. And with that you'll have 8 Herta wands, so you can just snag this really easily. You get more of an attack boost compared to like Clara's light cone for example, and as long as you're weakness breaking every couple of turns, you're also getting that extra damage boost. And finally, we've got her signature light cone. This is obviously going to be her best in slot. The crit damage buff is really nice. When the wearer gets hit or does an attack, you get 1 stack of an eclipse, up to 3 stacks. Each stack will buff Jingliu or whoever's wearing its damage, and then upon the 3rd stack, the next attack that you do will ignore 12% defense. So overall, a really nice lightcone to have in general, but it's not needed. If you're debating whether to go for an E1 Jingliu or S1, definitely go S1. You get tons more usage out of this lightcone, and you can even throw it onto any of your other destruction units. I think this is, as of right now at least, the most universal destruction lightcone upon like all the other units. So whilst it isn't necessary, it's also not a bad thing to get. Let's move on to relics. Firstly, let's talk about the Pioneer set. So in situations or team comps where you have a debuffer such as Pella or Silverwolf, this will probably be the best set to have for the most damage output. However, if you aren't using any of those characters or aren't in like a situation where debuffs are applied, you won't have any uptime on it, so it won't be as good as, for example, the Quantum set. Speaking of which, this is what I personally use and prefer. It's the 4-piece Quantum set. This is a pretty good option. You get a defense ignore of 10%, and if the enemy is weak to Quantum, this effect doubles and you'll get 20% defense ignore. If you haven't gotten past Bellabog just yet, you can access this cavern and you can farm it there. To this day, I think every account does need at least one usable Quantum set. When you're farming, if you do get the other set, then it's still pretty decent for some of your supports. You can make them tankier. And the last 4-piece set I would recommend is the 4-piece Ice set. It gives you an ice damage buff, and when you use your ultimate, you get buffed crit damage for 2 turns. Farming 4-piece sets can be a little bit time consuming, so if you do have a 2-piece set that you want to use, you can mix and match. Don't mix and match with the Quantum set, you don't need the Quantum damage bonus, but you can run 2-piece ice with 2-piece Pioneer set, or you could run it with the Hackerspace set, or Musketeer or Prisoner for that extra attack boost. As for the Planet Ornaments, Rutilant Arena will be her best set. The initial 8% crit rate is great, and when you reach above 70% crit rate, so that will be in battle, you get an extra skill damage boost. You do get this set from World 7, which is a pretty good world to farm for both your DPS and your supports. Next up, we've got the Glamoth set. This is the World 8 set. It's decent to farm. This set will give Jingliu a 12% attack boost, and when you reach 135 speed, you'll get an extra 12% damage buff. Next up is the Sigonia set. This will give Jingliu an extra 4% crit rate, and in a longer wave kind of format of fights, so where there's a ton of enemies and stuff like that, you can get up to 40% extra crit damage buff as well. Some other sets to note are the Inert Salsoto set. The initial 8% crit rate buff is good, and you can also make use of the ultimate damage buff. You won't get anything else because the rest relies on follow-up attacks. If you happen to have a spare set that's lying around, feel free to throw that on her. And lastly, this will be mostly an early game kind of set to use. You can use the Space Sealing Station set. This will be fine for all of you early game players until you can choose one of the other sets. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's go over some good stat checkpoints. Her kit does give her a lot of attack, so around 2.2k attack should be enough. In that 2.2 to 2.4 range should be fine. As for crit rate, you want to get at least 40%, that should be the most comfortable. In battle, that should be 80 to 90% depending on your trace level. And then just as a general rule of thumb, 134 speed is usually how it goes, but 135 usually helps a bit more, especially if you're running that Glamoth set, or you're going to be running her with a Bronya, so you can run your Bronya at 134 and then it'll be fine. Just a little note, if you are running a Bronya with your Jingliu, and you do plan to run the 135 speed Jingliu with a 134 Bronya, don't use the Hackerspace set. It can mess up your speed tuning and have your Bronya going before her and then just ruin what you've tried to do. You can also just run a hyperspeed Bronya and just stack up as much speed as possible, and then you can just have her go crazy and then not have to build Jingliu with any speed. But that's more of a later game thing when you have way more speed substat relics. And the same basically goes for Sparkle. Although slower speed Sparkles aren't always as effective as a Bronya in terms of boosting that action value, so do just take note of that. Now for some main stats. For your body piece, you're going to want crit damage. For your boots, you can run speed or attack percent, it's up to you. And then for your orb, you'll want an ice damage orb, and then the attack percent robe is what you'll go for that. Your best substats to aim for are crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, speed, and then everything else is just whatever. Now let's talk about some team comps. In almost all scenarios, you'll be running a hypercarry team comp, so Jingliu will be on the team with either 2 harmony units, 1 harmony and 1 debuffer, so an agility unit, and then 1 healer / sustain. I'd recommend a healer since she does eat away at HP more than like an average DPS does. So I'd recommend running her with a Sparkle or a Bronya, just so you have less downtime when she's not in her enhanced state. And then for your other slot, you can run either Ranmei, Pella, Silverwolf, or Tingyan. Silverwolf is only really good for those single target scenarios or ones with just generally lower amounts of enemies. If there's any of these units that you don't have, just mix and match with who you do have, you'll mostly be fine. As for your sustain units, Fujuan is the only one that isn't a healer that you could really run well, and then you've got Huohuo, who's especially good with their energy regeneration, and a more wide AoE heal with her skill. But any healer will be fine, just use what you have. If you don't have Sparkle or Bronya, that's totally fine. That downtime I mentioned isn't as bad as you think. It's more of an optimization for your endgame stuff. And lastly, let's talk about her synergy with Blade. So Blade doesn't really provide anything for her, but Blade does benefit from her on the team. Whenever she does use her skill, she'll take away some HP from him and trigger his talent. In a team comp like that, you'll probably benefit more from using someone like Ronmei or Pella for more AoE, and then someone like Ho-Ho. Since it is a rerun, maybe some of you are thinking about picking up an extra copy, so we'll go over her Eidolons really quick. She's more than fine at E0, E1 lets her do some more damage in a single target scenario, her E2 makes her next enhanced skill after an ult do 80% more damage, which is kind of nice. Her E4 isn't notable, so I won't really mention it. Don't really aim for this. If you're gonna go all the way for E6, that's the only time you should be picking up an E4. And lastly, her E6 gives her 50 crit damage and lets her gain up to 4 stacks in her spectral state. Well, that does it for today's video. Hopefully you found it helpful. Let me know who you guys are pulling for, if you are going for Jingliu, or maybe you're going for Aventurine, or you're saving for a future character. I'd love to know. Good luck with your pulls. May you lose all your 50/50s just like me.
Whoa, hey.
But yeah, catch you guys in the next video. Bye.